I have a very short bundle of the Regulus Field Centers, which I'll have a chunk of these in Chicago to hand to people for free, by the way. Because a lot of people really like that when we did that at the last Columbus Regional. And the Sky Striker tokens, based on like Anya's little smug face, are up. They are in sets of 2 for $22. So I'll leave a link down below so you can get yours. Now we're going to pass on over for the top decks of the month. Welcome to July 2022. We're going to be talking about the top 5 decks that I think will be your surefire best decks to take to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series for America. And if you're just planning on playing in general this month, these will be the best decks until Power of the Elements. I'll make 30% of guys and not smash the living crap out of that subscribe button. Smash as we climb up the 100K ladder here. Number 1 on our list here is going to be none other than Floowandereeze. Now, we've made a couple videos talking about how a lot of players as of late have, well, I guess the whole pro circus in general has just been kind of losing their mind when it comes to this deck. And I can understand why. You know, like, a walking, talking Floodgate, Harpies, Featherstorms, you know, Mystic Mind, the whole rest of the trash heap of just walking, talking, destroy your opponent, anger them. Playing the game on your opponent's turn. You know, Flunder does everything that a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks wish they could do. And it's almost kind of funny because a lot of people are looking at Flunder recently. They're like, I don't understand how this deck loses. Well, I mean, it inherently loses to itself. Does that sound like Phantom Knights? You guys remember Phantom Knights, right? You guys remember how that deck's greatest weakness was itself? Well, they patched Flunder's, you know, weaknesses over time. But if you're planning on playing at the Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series, or for the rest of this month, I would highly recommend looking at what is going on here with birds, because, like I said, we've watched so many deck profiles on this channel, and the very common theme that I'm hearing from players is just the, I hate Flunder. Flunder's the worst matchup in the world. Oh my god, like, this deck is so unfair, it should be banned. You just mad you lost to a giant penguin that's laughing his ass off at you because you just couldn't play around it, alright? I know it's not usually Impen that's the problem. It's, you know, Stormwinds, you know, the Harpies, Featherstorms. It's everything else that that little toolbox deck can do, and it's definitely solidified its spot higher up here on the tier list this month. So if you want to be that guy at the WCQ, and you're feeling, you know, a little bit anxious about playing the Floowandereeze, you know what? I think it's still a good pick. Even like post Power of the Elements, I don't think the deck's terrible, alright? It's not amazing, but it's definitely there. Next up is Despia. Now, to put Despia at number 4 here, I'm a little bit crazy, I know. But here's the thing about this, ladies and gentlemen. The deck is still good. Its track record has just gone down the pooper. Like, I'm sorry to tell you this, but when every single deck has some sort of dimensional barrier for you, of course your representation's gonna start going down. What do you think's gonna happen? That's the issue with decks that are dedicated to like these 1 to 2 summoning mechanics. The one bad thing is, like, once a check and an answer are, you know, found for them, and they become, you know, doable for the format, that just means a lot of players, they just lose to them. Now, this deck also has a second counter pick in the format, which is called Anti-Spell Fragrance. Oh boy. So that's 2 very unfun cards that this deck has to play through now. But don't get me wrong here. I'm still putting it relatively high on the list, because when this deck goes, it still has a lot of oomph. And I still will put it very high because of the boards it generates. Some of the rather ridiculous situations that you can find yourself in with this deck, you know, just building those relatively huge boards, and a lot of players have issues with those boards. And, you know, Brain and Red is still a powerful card, ladies and gentlemen. Like, don't get me wrong about that. The biggest advantage for this deck is, you know, now that Nibiru is running around, that's technically one less hand trap that it has, but like I said, when you lose hard with Despia. Yeah, man. Anti-Scam Fragrance and, you know, that powerhouse that is Dimensional Barrier just both ruined this deck's day. Like, it just took for them being mainstream to just phase this deck really, really low on the tier list. And, you know, it was really high up there, but not anymore. Next up here is Swordsoul, and you're like, wow, we got a lot of strange movements here, Robbie. Yeah, I know. So you know what makes Swordsoul fall out of a format, ladies and gentlemen? Look at me. Okay, so when a format starts to evolve from the, oh, Despia is the best deck in the room, to... Oh, is that Nibiru? Oh my god, Nibiru's back in the format. Oh my god, what happens to Swordsoul? You guessed it. As soon as things like Nibiru and, well, I guess Dimensional Barrier, because we're already multi-packing it on in there for our Despia matchup. When you have something like the Space Rock that proceeds into the format here, you know, as a natural check to another Predator in the format, you kind of start to see a thing here, ladies and gentlemen. And that thing is, Space Rock is coming, and Space Rock is taking numbers because his time needs to be here. Now, yes, you can still make Chow Fang in the deck. Yeah, you can make Psychic End Punisher now. We started to see Psychic End Punisher start to kind of show up in these Swordsoul decks, and you're like, how do you make... It's literally the level modification effect on the trap card when you banish it. Did you know that? Yeah. Did you know that? You get level modification effects on these Swordsoul cards. Alright, and yes, they can play Psychic End Punisher. If you haven't realized yet, Psychic End Punisher is a stupid good card. Like, amazing. There's a reason why base P.U.N.K Synchro has been performing and doing so damn well because of that. Now, don't get me wrong here. I think Swordsoul is on the higher end of the decks. Alright? Even though there's a clear check to it, the problem is the deck gets grinded out when it starts getting into those narrower games. Because, you know, hand traps are a good thing. You have to open up, like, full 10-yi combo with, like, normal summon and long Yun in order to, like, play through enough hand traps. But that doesn't happen very often. So that's still the downside of that. Next up here, I'm going to put based P.U.N.K Synchro. Or, yeah, we're based for short. So this can include things that, say, P.U.N.K Thurion, for example. I guess we can lump in here as well, even though they're kind of different. But the thing is, it's the Synchro Toolbox S deck of good stuff. It uses the Rose Dragon package, the adventure stuff. Some builds play the Eldritch stuff. I mean, like, it's not always a certainty. I know a lot of players like, well, then the deck becomes, like, Eldritch based. It's all the same crap, man. You're all synchroing up with generic good stuff, all right? Like, I don't care how you try to spin it. It's just a whole bunch of good synchro cards that basically make a board, all right? Chaos Ruler, Psychic End Punisher. This is another deck that gets access to Psychic End Punisher, by the way, yeah. And this is also the other deck that our dear friend Space Rock kind of wants to come into the format and ruin. If you time a well-timed board on this, you can break it apart. Also, not all builds for based run the Scythe package. I think a majority of them do. Don't quote me on that. I know I've seen some builds that were doing it and other builds just don't really care about it. But in terms of like your ceiling and development for the format, I think this deck has the craziest upper ceiling just in terms of development for what it wants to do. And I think that's a very impressive thing to say, because when you look at like Swordsoul, Despia, Floowandereeze, their game plans are fairly simple in terms of what they want to do, but this deck is leagues further ahead of them in terms of power scaling and development, and I'm only putting it above Swordsoul, even though it doesn't always have higher representation than Swordsoul out of these top cuts, though it did out of some nationals. It does definitely pay the bills, at least the P.U.N.K package does. Like, P.U.N.K in general is just amazing. Alright, and then the last deck I want to talk about here is Dragon Link. Now you're probably like, Robbie, why in the hell are you putting Dragon Link so far up on the list here? Well, I figured I would humor a few people, one of them being Lundready here, that was talking about how Dragon Link is basically the run behind best deck of the format. And I always kind of see this every time we get near the end of a format. Players have started to perfect these things. You know, honestly, the adventure package in this deck is pretty good. You can also play the P.U.N.K package in here as well for synchroing options. I've seen so many Dragon Link decks just kind of coming out of the woodwork here that it's actually kind of impressive, ladies and gentlemen. I will give, you know, a little tip of the hat to this deck. I do think overall that a lot of players are going to be caught off guard if they are playing in the Championship Series or playing at any point this month and they see Dragon Link, because this deck is projected to just crush hopes and dreams. And I'm definitely very curious to see what players will come up with, or really just some of the cool, crazy ideas overall that we will see out of players for developments for this deck. I mean, you have so many sub-packages. Even like your little decision tree of do I want to play the Chaos Emperor Dragon Pendulum or not, really make or break the little integral parts of this deck. So I guess little things to consider here for 500. So that is my breakdown for top decks for, yeah, July 2022. Please leave a comment down below, tell me what you guys think. I'm going to make a top 5 rogue video, which will be very opinionated, by the way. So you guys can look forward to that. I'll see your beautiful faces back here later today, guys. Peace out. Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.